at the squad we have assembled for you today. Talking football with us, Neek is ready. Desmond is ready. Dan Graziano has the insight. Damian Woody will be along in moments as well. And we will get you plenty of NFL news, but it begins with the big story of the night, and that was the latest college football playoff rankings. We're no surprise. Alabama remains number 1. Notre Dame is 2. Clemson 3. Ohio State 4. Texas A&M 5. And Iowa State moving up a spot to number 6. In fact, let's take a look at those top 6 teams, and I will tell you why this is the number where we cut it off. Going back to 2014, no team ranked lower than 6th in these second-to-last rankings, penultimate rankings, if you will, made a jump into the top 4 in the final poll release. So those are the pieces of information that we have. Let's figure out what they mean. Paul Finebaum is here. Heather is ready to go as well. And Heather, I will start with you. In your view, what was the most important thing that came out of last night's rankings?
Well, the most important thing was that Florida only dropped 1 spot. And I say that was important because they're still in the conversation. And I was shocked by that because they had a bad loss to LSU. But the reason the committee did that, according to CFP Chair Gary Barta, is because they didn't want to put them below Georgia because of the head-to-head. And at this point, it is this simple. They think Florida is better than Cincinnati in spite of 2 losses. Now, I would not pick Florida to beat Alabama, and I don't think anybody on this panel probably would, but the fact that they're still sitting there doesn't completely eliminate them from the conversation should they do that.
Right. So, in fact, let's go directly to it. Paul Finebaum, if Florida pulls off what would be, admittedly, a massive upset on Saturday, but it could happen, beating Alabama, do you believe they would make the playoff, and do you believe they would deserve it if they did?
I don't think they will, Greeny, because they still have Texas A&M to deal with. And why is that important? Texas A&M beat Florida head-to-head, just like Heather said in terms of the Florida-Georgia conundrum. Florida has an issue with A&M. The difference would be they would have a conference championship, and they would have a win over the number 1 team in the country, the same team that beat Texas A&M by 28 points. But it's pretty obvious this committee follows the rule of the eye test. They like what they see with Florida. They don't pay much attention to metrics in spite of what the committee chairman tells us every Tuesday night.
So, Desmond, let me come to you then on a pretty general question. As we look outside the top 4, which of the teams that are not currently in that top 4 do you think has the best chance of getting in on Sunday?
I think the team that should have the best chance would be the team that no one's talking about, and it's Texas A&M. But they're sitting there still at number 5, and people aren't really giving them their just due. I don't understand why. You know, you hear some arguments saying, well, you know, they played Alabama once. Do you really want to see that again? That shouldn't even factor into the equation if you think by their resume they deserve to be a top 4 team. But I tell you what, Greeny and Paul, you can echo the sentiments. It seems as though the CFP loves the SEC because, like Heather said, that was just mind-blowing that Florida could lose to one of the worst teams in the conference who's having an awful year at home and then only drop 1 slot down. You're talking about 4 teams from the SEC in the top 10. 2 of the 4 teams got 2 losses. Florida's sitting there with the ugliest loss of them all, and they only dropped 1 slot down. That just blew my mind. And then you sit there and listen to Gary Barta and poor Reese Davis. And Reese, you know, shout out Reese. He just turned, you know, double nickels, had a happy birthday. But he's asking this gentleman questions, and he's not giving them any straight answers. It's like, I'm like, want to text Reese, like, hey, Reese, ask him where was he born. I bet you he'd give you the runaround. You know, so poor Reese is doing the best job he can, but Barta's not giving us any straight answers. Man, I tell you what, hey, I know, Greeny, you love chaos. There's going to be some chaos after Saturday's games. I guarantee you that.
Let's find out what we think that might be. Heather, I watched that special as well that Desmond was talking about last night. Not the special, you know, the show where they released these rankings. Everyone seemed to be very upset about Cincinnati. Explain to the audience who isn't following this closely why everyone feels Cincinnati has such a legitimate right to feel aggrieved.
Well, because they're undefeated and they've played 8 games, and the number of games matters, according to the selection committee chair. Now, that being said, they haven't played since November 21st. I did think it was interesting that I asked Gary Barta what besides Cincinnati's strength of schedule is weighing it down. And he said because they haven't played since November 21st, they actually went back and looked at the game film against UCF. He told me they struggled a little bit in that game. They had to come from behind. And again, as I said before, they think Florida is a better team. All back to the eye test.
And so, Paul, let me finish it up for now with you on this, and we'll have much more on this as we go. But if the favorites in 3 games were to win over the weekend, which would be Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, then there really would be no chaos, right? Is it as simple as saying if those 3 teams win, we know the 4 teams that are getting in right now? Is that right?
That is correct. And by the way, I've been thinking about it. I think the committee may be smarter than we think they are. I think Florida is a ruse. Why? A week ago, we're screaming and hollering about, oh, does Ohio State belong in the CFP? And nobody's even mentioning that any longer. It's all about Florida, a team that probably has absolutely no chance of beating Alabama. So, Greeny, you're right. And let's hope that there's chaos, as Desmond says, but more than likely, Sunday will be a very boring day.
Yeah, I root for chaos. We'll see if we wind up getting it. Heather, Paul, stay with us. Desmond, obviously, rolling along as we get to the NFL after I show you what my poll question is for today. Which team outside of the top 4 do you think will get into the playoff? You got A&M, you got Florida, Cincinnati, Iowa State playing for a Big 12 championship this weekend. My Twitter page is @ESPN Greeny. Log on, cast your vote. We'll check the results as we go. Meanwhile, to the NFL, where the Cowboys are 4-9 in their first year under Mike McCarthy. Their offense is ranked 21st. Their defense is ranked dead last. And yet, owner Jerry Jones continues to reiterate his steadfast confidence in McCarthy and his future.
I've been known to stick with these guys for in early troubled times on coaching. I don't understand, frankly, just show how ridiculous this conversation is in terms of it actually having any meat on the bone. I don't think I've even dreamed the thought of Mike not being the coach.
Okay, so he does have a unique way of putting things. Dan Graziano, let me start with you, my information man extraordinaire. He's saying Mike McCarthy's not going anywhere. So is that to suggest that there will be no significant changes in Dallas after this disaster of a season?
Well, I guess it depends what you mean by significant. Obviously, I think we take him at his word that the head coach isn't going anywhere. Could they make a change? You mentioned their last in defense. Defensive coordinator Mike Nolan, could that be somebody who's on the hot seat? Do they make a change at that position? I know people in the building in Dallas are disappointed that the defense didn't come together under Mike Nolan. They thought that it would be better, so I would watch out for that. On the offensive side, remember, Kellen Moore is a holdover from Jason Garrett's staff and a favorite of Cowboys management and ownership. So I would be surprised if they made a move on that end. But if there's a big change in Dallas, I would think it would be on the defensive side of the ball.
All right, and so then, Dominique, pardon me, let me come to you. I noticed your skeptical expression as we were listening to Jerry Jones. What was that face for?
So, first of all, this job feels like it is too big for Mike McCarthy. Like that motorcycle on the cover of Purple Rain looks like it's too big for Prince. He doesn't seem to be able to handle this job at the time. And Dan is right. Dan is right about that defense. That defense is really bad. That defense stinks like earring backs. So I'd be surprised if Mike Nolan comes back. There's no good reason to bring him back. And the last thing I wanted to say is Dak Prescott really should have some say in this decision because they decided not to extend Dak Prescott and give him a big contract. They franchise tagged him. So now Dak is in a position where he could choose to leave or go somewhere else or potentially pressure a trade or wait till he gets to free agency. That was a mistake, but that gives him so much power in this situation that I think he has to be on board for whatever coach they keep or decide to bring in. So if I was Jerry Jones, rather than going on the radio, I would go to Dak Prescott's house and try to convince him that this is the right move or find out what he thinks the right move is at this time. I think what Jerry should do is try to get him to forget about the past, the way that they may have disrespected him or tried to shortchange him in the past. I would tell him something that my friend Andre used to tell me. Spaceships don't come equipped with rear view mirrors. That's where we're headed, so don't look back. And if I was Dak Prescott, I would respond to that by saying, that's because they dip as quick as they can, and you will be all alone. If I was Dak Prescott, you get out of there. I have so much more to say on this, but I feel like I'm monopolizing the time. I'll let Damian say something before I dominate this whole Dak Prescott segment.
Yeah. So D. Wood, let me come to you on that thought, because while we would not expect Jerry Jones to consult with Dak on this decision, Dak really will have much to say about it in the way of his actions, right? He holds the cards in this situation. If he doesn't like it, there are things he can do about it.
Greeny, it's time to blow this joint up, man. Take some TNT to this thing and blow this thing up. I'm going to just tell you, drop one bomb in here and it's going to be over. The Dallas Cowboys, since Dak Prescott been out, have the worst offense in the league. Think about that. The Dallas Cowboys with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Zeke Elliott, they have a worse offense than your New York Jets, Greeny. That's bad, okay? So this whole Mike McCarthy, with Jerry Jones talking, it's so preposterous. I mean, hell, if you got an offense worse than the Jets since your quarterback went down, and with a capable backup, we got problems, Jack.
I think that's actually a point. It's a point well taken, because he's not just a capable backup. He's a backup who I think was the best backup, or certainly the most ready to step in and win games of any in the NFL this season. So, Dominique, does that make sense to you? We can talk about how he doesn't want to pay 2 coaching staffs, but he does have a team that's worth $5 billion.
Yeah, I think he can afford it. That's not the problem. I think the continuity is something that he's more concerned with. I think the defense is not a question. It stinks, as we talked about before, so they will change there. But I'm not sure Kellen Moore is the golden child that they once thought he was. I understand you lost your quarterback, the best quarterback they've had in Dallas in a long time, since Tony Romo, obviously. I understand that you lost him, so your offense is going to take a dive, but it's not supposed to be this bad. Like, it reminds me of the song Silent Night. Like, a lot of people sing Silent Night. You can go on whatever streaming service and find a bunch of songs